Everyone, this is Mark Bernard from Product Management, and today we have a lot of information to cover. A little disclaimer up front, there are a few forward-looking statements in this presentation towards the end, so please be aware of our little disclaimer. We are going to cover quite a bit of topics. In the beginning, I'll talk a little bit about the simplification of our data warehousing solutions, SAP BW, and how we got to BW4HANA, what are the differences, and then we'll cover the main part of this presentation, which is going into the different paths on how you get from an existing BW system to BW4HANA. As you can see, there are three distinct paths. Most of the time we'll spend today talking about the system conversion, which has two variants. So here's the agenda for today. To talk about the simplification of the data warehouse and then new installation system conversion. At the end, a few remarks about landscape transformation, and then we'll summarize the call. So the key thing for you to understand is the difference between SAP BW code line and what we have done end of last year, 2016, by carving out a certain piece of BW and making this the starting point for BW4HANA. The BW code line is compatible with all different database platforms that BW runs on, and over the years has collected lots of different features and functionality. And as you can see, 2012 we ported the BW code line to the HANA platform, and therefore also we have optimized a lot of the data modeling to run on the HANA platform. For HANA, the question is really, what is the difference between your BW system and what are you using in terms of functionality that is not available in BW4HANA anymore? There is a longer list. We have removed a lot of legacy functionality, obsolete features that have collected over the years and are not relevant anymore for running a data warehouse solution on the HANA platform. And you can see here a little piece of this list starts out with the front-end pieces that we moved to business objects. Bex Query Designer moved also into a BW modeling tools on Eclipse. And then there is a longer list. And as indicated here on this PowerPoint slide, you can see some have automated tools available that can do the conversion for you. And in some cases, you have to intervene manually and maybe redesign certain processes. So the question is now, what is relevant for your particular system? And that's where the simplification list and lots of tools will help you to get a better understanding of what is exactly configured in your particular system. The simplification list lists all the differences between the BW 7.0 release and BW4HANA. Why 7.0? Well, 7.0 is the lowest release that we can use as a starting point to convert and transition a system to BW4HANA. Therefore, we documented all the deltas. The list is available on help.sap.com. It's a very long document because it really contains all the deltas. Important to understand is not everything will be relevant for your particular system. You have probably used only a subset of these features, and therefore we'll have to find out what exactly is in your system and compare that to the simplification list. And tools like the pre-check tool and SAP Readiness Check that will come out later this year are going to help greatly in this endeavor. And if you want to have an overview, you can just download this PDF and read the whole thing through. So our three paths are the new installation, system conversions, and the landscape transformation. New installation, the so-called greenfield approach, is pretty straightforward. You can actually, if you have some legacy BW systems where you want to use some pieces, also transport functionality into BW4HANA system, but in general, with the greenfield, you start from scratch. The system conversion has two different variants. The in-place conversion will take your system through a transition going to the HANA database with database migration first, and then doing a release upgrade to the latest BW release 5. You'll add the starter add-on, and this will then enable all the conversion tools and allow you to change the data models over to what's compatible with BW4HANA. So you take your existing system through this path. If you have a little bit older system and you don't like all the things that you have in your BW, you want to just take certain parts of it, you can do the so-called brownfield approach or use a remote conversion for this. This is an additional tool that can take data models and data flows out of an existing BW system and move them into a brand new installed BW4HANA. If you have a little bit more complicated system landscape with several BW systems, then we recommend to do a landscape transformation project and consolidate these BWs into a single instance of BW4HANA. This will give you a great starting point and allow you to simplify everything in your data warehousing landscape. Let's have a look first, a few comments on the new implementation. If you start out with BW4HANA, after the system installation, the technical piece of it, we recommend to go through this document by my colleague Roland Kramer. The first guidance with the complete functional scope will make sure that all the different pieces are configured properly. For example, HANA Studio and modeling tools and are all listed in this document. Please go through that. If you have a new installation, then you're sure that everything is working right out of the gate. What's really new with BW4HANA is the data flow modeling. Our first customers have given us very nice feedback and love this tool. It allows some graphical modeling of your data warehouse structures and layered scalable architecture. Drag and drop environment, you get a little palette on the side and you can just drag the objects into this canvas, connect them with lines which then are building your transformations and data flows. A very nice way also to document everything. Is much nicer than just having the single object in a little tree control on the side if you use the graphical view to actually design your data warehouse. So let's have a talk about the Transfer Toolbox. The Transfer Toolbox came into play in June this year and is now available for all customers. A little bit more on the availability at the end of the presentation. The in-place conversion, as I said, will take your complete existing system through a transformation process. You will step-by-step convert all existing classical data models into their HANA-optimized counterparts. And at the very end, when you have done this for all objects in your system and you have gotten rid of all the legacy functionality, you do a system conversion to BW4HANA. The minimum start release is BW75 SP5, and you have to be on the HANA platform to do a system conversion. The alternative is the remote conversion. Since you bring up a brand new installation, it's very low risk. If anything goes wrong, you can always fall back to your BW system that's in production, and therefore really have no risk to your existing production landscape. How this works in general is we taking data models out of BW and putting them into the BW4HANA system, and at the time of import, we do the HANA optimization. So taking a cube out of BW and then turning it into an advanced data object, for example, when it's imported into BW4HANA. The minimum here is BW70, and you don't have to be on HANA. You can be on any database that's supported by BW. For any of these processes, I recommend to use the BW Migration Cockpit. It's a launchpad for a large variety of tools that are necessary for doing cleanup tasks, checking your systems, housekeeping, and automating a lot of the migration and conversion processes. And it's going to be very helpful for you. Go to this node 190.95.97. It has all the instructions on how to get the migration cockpit and how to install the tools related to it. And nice thing, it's free. Now let's look into a little bit more detail for the in-place conversion. As I said, you can start with BW on any release in any database. However, there are some prerequisites before you can get to the actual conversion tools. Number one would be you have to be moving to the HANA database, and this can be done with database migration. Typically, you'll use the database migration option to accomplish this. At the same time, you would go to BW7.5 with your system landscape and then install the so-called BW4HANA starter add-on. With the starter add-on, you enable all the conversion tools in your system and can start to do the HANA optimization of your data models and data flows. When everything is done, you'll do then the final conversion, and that is really when you have your go-live weekend with a little bit of downtime to do the final system conversion to BW4HANA. In a little bit more detail, this looks like this. There is a discovery phase up front for a week or two. You will start analyzing your system. Of course, you check the system requirements, compare this to the minimum start releases, software platform, hardware, and so you're sure that everything is ready to go. And then you will look into a little bit more details. The maintenance planner allows you to download the required software, in this case the starter add-on and the software stack for BW4HANA at the end. The maintenance planner will also check existing add-ons on your system. Important topic because there's only a limited number of add-ons available so far for BW4HANA. If you have some that are not compatible yet, if it's not compatible, please get back to us. If it's from SAP, if it's from a third-party vendor, you have to contact that vendor and check whether they will make the add-on available for BW4HANA. The pre-checks allow you to check your system. More on that a little bit later. It scans the complete system and gives you a nice output of what works and what doesn't work with BW4HANA. The custom code check is important because we have removed a lot of the functionality from BW4HANA, and you might as well go to a HANA platform from a different database platform. So you certainly want to make sure that the custom code is compatible, not just with the changes of the data models and data flows, but also with the different database platform and the new code line in BW4HANA. Most of the time you'll spend during the in-place conversion, after you make the decision to go with in-place, you install the starter add-on and then use the Transfer Toolbox to convert all your data models. Along with that, you adjust the custom code, and when everything is done, you do the final downtime with the system conversion. There's a little bit of a post-conversion to do. That happens in a couple hours together with the go-live, and then you hand over the system to your end users. Just a few comments on the prerequisites. If you're not on BW7.5 powered by HANA yet, here are the core tasks that you would have to go through. We certainly recommend some housekeeping to lower the size of the row store footprint in HANA as much as possible. Use inline storage to limit how much data you'll in the end need in the column store on HANA. And then finally use the database migration option to upgrade and migrate and potentially do a unicorn conversion to go to BW7.5. With the starter add-on, your BW system can run in 4 different modes. The BW mode speaks for itself. The system works just like SAP BW. However, when you move then further to the compatibility mode, we put your system into a little bit more of a stricter mode, meaning all objects that are not compatible with BW4HANA are underlying some limitations. First, you couldn't create any new objects like this. For example, info cubes, which are not available in BW4HANA, fall into this category. You couldn't create new info cubes, and you can also not transport existing ones. However, there is a whitelist. So in case you have to make changes for production support purposes, for example, you can do this by just adding these objects to the whitelist. The goal is to make all the changes to your data models and data flows during the compatibility mode, and then be able to move the system further forward to the so-called B4H mode. At that time, it runs pretty much the same as BW4HANA, so everything is HANA optimized in this case, and you're basically have the system ready to do the final step during the go-live weekend, where you would put the system into the ready for conversion mode and actually do the switch out of this SAP_BW component and put SAP BW4HANA on your system and go live with this. In a little bit of a different visualization, it looks like this. From one mode to the other, we are using so-called task lists. You'll see this later in the demo as well. The task list has several steps that are either manual steps that require input from you, or are automated steps that will run in a batch process and behind the scenes make certain changes to your system in order to move to the next mode. And you can see a little bit of that in more detail during the demo later. Now, how does it work to get this change from one system in your landscape to the next one? Well, first, you would make one of these scenario transfers in your development system. For example, you would take one of your data flows and convert the objects into HANA optimized objects. At that time, they're also written into a transport request. The remodeling also takes over the data. So we take the data out of an info cube and automatically put it into a new advanced data store object. And you keep doing that until everything is done. But for each of these scopes that you are converting, we are applying the same change also to your QA system first, and then later on, of course, to production as well. However, you have to run through this conversion process as well, also in QA and in your production system. But we are applying the same changes, as you can see here by the transfer of the scope, as well to QA and production. So over time, your landscape will gradually change to running in a HANA optimized way and therefore be compatible with BW4HANA. Here's one example of what this could look like on a very, very small scale. We have on the left side a classical data flow with data store object, an info cube, and a multi-provider on top, a couple of queries. After this transformation, you can see everything changes to advanced data store objects for the persistency and composite providers for the virtual layer. They keep the technical names of the objects the same, and therefore also the queries are staying stable. And however, there is one little exception, and that is if you have used navigational attributes in your data model and have used them in queries as well. In this case, we'll introduce a new composite provider in the middle for running the query. We have a clear separation in BW4HANA of the virtual layer and the persistency. So no more storing navigational attributes within the persistency. So advanced data store objects do not have navigational attributes. We move them to the virtual layer, the composite provider. This has additional benefits because you can have different sets of attributes for different composite providers and therefore have different virtual layers, for example, for different business units or different line of businesses, up to you. And you can change them quite easily without having to touch the persistency. For the data store object, the transfer of data is a little bit different. Here we are copying actually data only for the changelog because the request IDs are changing from the request TITs to the request transaction sequence numbers. So we are making this adjustment by copying the changelog. The active table is just being moved. It has a different technical name, important also for your custom code to remember this. But we don't have to make a copy of the data. We can change it in place. Activation queue is not moved. So therefore, all your classical DSOs will have to be activated before you start such a data transfer. Here's a couple of screenshots of what this pre-check tool looks like. You can see the 4 different modes: BW mode, compatibility mode, B4H mode, and the ready for conversion, and then 2 buttons so you can simulate the switch or actually execute it. Executing doesn't really harm if there's any errors. It would just stay in the current mode, if everything is fine, it just moves over to the next setting. You can also check transport. So if you're doing, for example, a greenfield implementation and want to transport certain settings, you can use this check here to make sure that you transport only objects that would work with BW4HANA. In the log, you can see there's lots and lots of messages and lists. It will check for all the different types of objects in BW, whether they're compatible with BW4HANA or not. And if not, you get little yellow lights for things that are not so critical, because there's typically tools available to do the work for you. And you would get red lights if there is some manual activity necessary, for example, converting certain objects to something that's compatible with BW4HANA, because there isn't an equivalent functionality available that has to be done manually. You can also see there is references to SAP nodes. Those are the SAP nodes that are listed also in the simplification list. So that's a one-to-one match. But the nice thing with this pre-check tool is that it looks at your particular system, so you get only little traffic lights for the things that are actually configured and relevant for your BW. When you start the in-place conversion for the first time, you get a little pop-up, asks you if you want to do in-place or remote. When you say in-place, you'll jump over to one of the task lists, and rather than sticking with the PowerPoint, I'll just show you the little demo. If you have to reset the flag, here is also the table that contains this flag. Sometimes you click too quickly and want to go back and change your mind. So you could just go into the table and make that little switch. So let me show you the little demo. I have to start it here from the beginning. It goes through the conversion of 2 process chains and 1 data flow. So at the beginning, we see here the little data flow and the things that are going to change. So cubes are changing to advanced data store objects, multi-providers to composite provider. We have a little area of a process change. Oops, I switched too fast. Second process chain for housekeeping, where, for example, PSA deletion, collapsing of requests has to be changed over from cubes to data store objects. Or advanced data objects in this case. To trigger the actual transfer toolbox, you start transaction STC01 and pick this BW4 transfer in place task list. The first step of the task list is to pick which objects you actually want to convert. Nice place to start with is, of course, one of the process chains, because that's typically a nice clean scenario that you have configured in BW and you want to convert everything together. So you pick as a scope the process chain and continue running the task list. This will collect all dependent objects. So everything that was included in the process chain. If you click this little button at the top of the toolbar here, it will list all the objects, also the ones that don't have to be changed. You get a few columns here. The ones on the left side are the original object, and then the ones in the middle, the ones that are changing. And in some cases, there is additional information necessary, and you can also see which objects depend on each other, this object that are going to be changed. So let's hide the ones that are actually not changing at all, and focus on the ones that are actually going to be changed. So the first one would be a cube to an advanced DSO and an M. We had data flow with info package and PSA included. PSAs don't exist in BW4HANA. We use advanced data objects instead, but it's optional, so you can add those if you like to the conversion. When you continue with the task list, the next step is to do the mapping of info objects in certain info providers. This is relevant for multi-providers that have not a complete and consistent info object mapping. If you have done this already in the past, then this step would not come up with any additional requirements. An important part of the task list is to check the usage of the involved objects that are part of the conversion run. So one of them is to look whether any objects are used in the data flow or in transformations that require manual changes. So in this case, this classical DSO table, you see here the active table, is found in an include in some custom code, and therefore we have to look at this custom code and see what needs to be changed. It's a very simple example here, but the same logic would apply, for example, for transformations as well. So here you see there's a select statement from the active table of the DSO, and we need to change this. As always recommended, it's better to use an API call, because had you used the API call in the first place, you would not have to change anything in your custom code, as the object names are staying the same. So here we're replacing the custom select with the API, and then you're good going forward. The same thing has to happen with the transformation routines. There's 3 here. Again, there's select on DSO tables found, and you have to go through the complete list and confirm all the different use cases where this routine, for example, or this custom table is used in routines. So we have one example for a start routine. It's already commented out, but of course you have to remember to make these adjustments and replace this after the conversion with the right table name, the advanced data store object. So you have to go through the complete list. There's 2 more cases. One are the classical customer exits. They're not used in BW4HANA anymore. We're using business add-ins and enhancement spots. So that's a custom code change that's quite often necessary for customers. And the second part is usage of authorizations. So this is also something that at the moment needs to be adjusted manually. Later in the roadmap, you'll see that we have this in our backlog to automatically adjust authorizations. We continue now through the task list. There's a manual step to confirm that the data sources and data load process are in sync between the new one and the old data flow. And then you continue. The last part is the one that's going to take the longest, because that's where we're actually copying the data from, for example, the info cube to an advanced data store object. So let's look after the transformation. You can see that now everything has changed to ADSOs for persistency, composite providers for the virtual layer on top. In certain cases, we, for example, had to include the PSA that was part of our task list to convert the info package to a PSA. And you can see the same thing in the process chain happening. And certain process steps are automatically replaced, like DSO activations or the various housekeeping tasks that are switched from DSOs and cubes to advanced DSOs as well. So I'll stop the demo here. There's a little bit more in terms of watching for all the data load history. You can see that if you filter here by time, or remove the time restriction, that all the data load history was converted as well. All the requests are still in the available under manage, but now with the new request transaction sequence number. Okay, we make this video also available on our YouTube channel right after this presentation, so you can take a look at your own pace if you like. So let's have a look a little bit at the remote conversion. The beginning of the remote conversion is exactly the same as in place. You would go through the maintenance planner, do the pre-checks and custom code analysis. maybe another remark for custom code. One of the number one recommendations I can give you is to check your existing production landscape, whether custom code is actually still used in production or whether it's just dormant and not used. This is a great opportunity for you to clean up so that unused custom code is actually not bothering you when you have to make any custom code adjustments. It's a great way to simplify your project. If you do, for example, usage and procedure logging up front, you will know when you get to the check phase and the custom code adjustment phase what actually needs to be adjusted rather than old code that's not used at all. The remote conversion is a little bit different than in place when it comes to the realization phase. It starts with the system provisioning of a brand new BW4HANA instance. At that point, you will need additional hardware because we're running in parallel to your existing BW database. We have a brand new BW4HANA. You can then start using the remote conversion tools. Work very similar to the in-place conversion, with the difference that we're moving now models and data flows across the wire from one BW to the new BW4HANA. And at import time, the magic happens that changes the data models to HANA optimized versions. When you're done and you're happy with the parallel run, reconciled all the data, you do a little bit of post-conversion and then go live with BW4HANA. At that point, you decommission your old BW system and you get your hardware that BW was running on back. The transfer of the scope, very similar as well to in place. However, we are, since we're moving here in a brand new system landscape, we are moving the new objects using transports on the BW4HANA side. We don't want to touch the existing BW landscape, so we do all the changes only on BW4HANA. So once everything is transported and the data is transferred in one landscape, we transport the changes to the next landscape and then apply the same data modeling changes and transfer of data also in test and production. This picture is exactly the same. However, the changes in terms of the data models are happening, of course, only in BW4HANA. So we can skip over that, but I will show you in addition how we are actually moving the data now between the two systems. On the BW side, we are going to use cluster tables to collect all the data that needs to be transferred. We zip them up, and then we're using an RSC connection to bring the data over to BW4HANA, where the opposite is happening, unpack the cluster tables and insert the data that has been transferred into the advanced data store objects. At the same time, we are adjusting the request metadata, so going from request sys on one side to the new request transaction sequence numbers on the BW4HANA side. And this is actually where the name of the remote conversion comes from. As you can see here, it's an RSC call, a remote function call to get the data from one side to the other, and therefore we called it remote conversion. The remote conversion also has a task list. It's very similar to the in-place conversion, so I don't have to show you that one again. But instead, I'll focus a little bit on the additional tool. It's a called SAP BW4HANA Conversion Cockpit. It's developed and maintained by a group within SAP, the so-called Data Management and Landscape Transformation team. And it's a very nice and detailed dashboard to make sure that the data is coming from one system to the other and stays also in sync. As you can see, there's lots of traffic lights and status management around all the different tasks. Everything is logged in detail. There's a lot of things that need to be taken into consideration, and using this conversion cockpit will make sure that everything happens in the right order and also is executed successfully. Nevertheless, the tool is quite complex. It's also used for system landscape transformation activities. So at least for the foreseeable time, we recommend or we require actually that you're running remote conversion projects together with this team, so that can make sure that this is done all properly and provide the right guidance for remote conversion projects to you. A few comments on BPC. You probably know that SAP BPC is now also available for BW4HANA. However, there is a few additional things to take into consideration when you do a system conversion using business planning and consolidation. First of all, the Transfer Toolbox is not available yet. It will become available in Q4 this year, and it has a little bit of different minimum releases. So for an in-place conversion, you'll have to move your system to BW75 SP9. Without BPC, it was SP5 as a starting point. So with BPC, it's a little bit more. However, the target version is then SAP BW4HANA together with BPC 11. So we can do this in a few months also with BPC installed on your BW side. We also have the goal to support the remote conversion. Here we can go from lower releases, and the goal is to support also BPC version 10 as a starting point. Now there's different flavors of BPC. We are going to support pretty much everything that runs on NetWeaver. So whether that's the standard BPC on BW with NLDB or running on HANA, we'll support conversions of BW integrated planning on any database or BW integrated planning running with the planning application kit on HANA. All are basically going the same path. As an intermediate step, you have to get to the 7.5 release and be running on SAP HANA as a platform, and from there you can do the in-place conversion in a very, very similar way that I just showed you before. Running without BPC, we will do the same thing with BPC, meaning we can also optimize the data models that your planning applications are built on. The good news here again is that you can start already now by moving along this path. Once you are on 7.5 as a preparation step, you can then start the transfer tools in a few weeks to convert and optimize your data models for the planning applications as well. There's already one scenario available, and that is to do a remote conversion for the standard model. In this case, we're not relying on the Transfer Toolbox, but you can use the backup and restore mechanism. You see the little transaction code. So you take a backup of your existing standard BPC application and environment in your system today, and then you can import that or restore that backup on a BPC 11 version for BW4HANA. The other variant, mainly the embedded model, we are planning to ship in Q4 this year, and will then support the in-place conversion and remote conversion with a specialized task list. And we will also support doing an in-place conversion for the standard model. There's a few more slides with the specific release numbers in the roadmap section. Mentioned the landscape transformation in the beginning as well. This is planned to be also offered by the Data Management Landscape Transformation Group. Typically, it's a combination of in-place conversion, remote conversions, maybe a little bit greenfield here and there. But it's a very customer-specific situation. There's not two BW landscapes that are the same. If you have several BW systems, there's lots of things to take into consideration, from master data harmonization, synchronizing, security, user management, and this group is the expert in doing these kind of system consolidation projects. So please get in touch with them if you plan to do any kind of consolidation of several BW systems. A few more words on availability and roadmap. So what is already available for everyone to use, and that's where we say you can start already today, are the pre-check tools. They are supported all the way back to release 7.0. You require maybe a couple nodes to be implemented depending on so the release pre-checks are released, and you can start using them in any of your BW systems. If you want to do an in-place conversion, they have the first version available. You just have to go through this one. It's the node 23835330. And with that node, you'll get all the instructions on how to install the various tools, whether it's preparation, in place. In this case, you will need the DMIS add-on that provides the BW conversion cockpit for syncing the data between your BW system and BW4HANA. Everything is under a little bit of a piloting phase. The main reason is not because the tools aren't working properly, but we want to have a very close relationship with our first customers, and therefore provide early adopter support from product management and from development directly. And this pilot node is kind of like the little gatekeeper here to make sure that we're in touch with all the different projects that are going on. And we actually have customers running in-place conversions on 7.5 and remote conversions on every release that you see here on the landscape. There is, of course, a longer backlog for things that we want to include in the Transfer Toolbox. What's available already today is what you see here in the version 1 of the Transfer Toolbox and what I presented you today. In Q4, the main part that we'll add is support for converting also authorization objects. And as you can see here in the middle section, support for BPC and doing in place as well as remote conversions for business planning objects as well. There's a longer list, so if you're running conversion projects, please provide feedback to us so that we can prioritize our backlog accordingly. Here's the slide for the BPC versions and which minimum releases are required to do a conversion of either standard or embedded model. So let's summarize what we talked about today, and then we can get to some question and answers. I'm sure you have lots of questions. Everybody should understand that BW4HANA is the innovation code line. There is no more new development in BW. It's pretty much in maintenance mode. You might see here and there a little bit of enhancements because BW is embedded in S4HANA, and but other than that, all the new development is happening on the BW4HANA code line. Please have a look at the simplification list. Run the pre-check tools in your system so you can see which simplification items are relevant for you, and then you can have a look in the simplification list or the corresponding SAP nodes of what needs to be done, whether there are automatic conversion tools available or whether some manual changes are necessary. And in case of manual changes, we typically give you some recommendations on what would be the best approach to handle these kind of situations. We have the different paths. You can run the pre-check tools in any case, in any of your BW systems today, and then based on the outcome, make a choice whether you want to do an in-place conversion or a remote conversion, or in some cases, maybe go for a complete greenfield implementation. You can start at any time, and please leverage the tools that we are providing. The migration cockpit and the pre-check program are great places to get started. It just gives you a very fact-based approach rather than guessing how many cubes you have in your system and how many analysis processes you have that need to be adjusted. You get actual numbers, and that will help you then also make an estimate on how long and the project for conversion is going to take. If you don't want to do that yourself, you can also bring SAP on board. We have a so-called discovery workshop available for BW4HANA. In this case, you will be working together with SAP services, and they will provide recommendations to you on whether that should be an in-place conversion, a remote conversion, and of course, give you also an estimate on the efforts for doing such a project. In any case, we're using the task list once you're actually in a project to convert one scenario after the other, and when everything is done, you have a go live with a simplified data warehouse in BW4HANA. Okay, I know this was a lot of information. I actually have included a larger appendix in the slide deck with many more details. There, just to mention a few, there are all the links to the important websites that you can contain information for BW4HANA, like the frequently asked questions and the roadmap. There's a section about the services that we offer, and also which training programs and certifications are available. So please have a look afterwards when you download the presentation at the appendix. I'm sure you find that very helpful. Okay, so thank you very much.